Welcome back, everybody. This is going to be the second video in a series that covers this particular tutorial here. So Microsoft, it is based on ASP.NET Core version 7. And you can see here I'm in the 7 version, and it does tell me there's a newer version, but we started in 7. So we're going to play through on that version and follow these directions. I did do an upgrade of my Visual Studio a little earlier today, though, to allow me to do 8. So, I'm kind of prepared for that. The other thing I learned is when I'm doing these videos is sometimes my face is appearing and I'm not digging it. So I'm going to mute my camera. All right. But hopefully you guys can still hear my voice. So just to review where we left off last time, we started with this tutorial, and we managed to go through some of the preliminary steps. So we know that we had the right, as they call it, workloads installed. So ASP.NET Web Development Tools were installed. We are using Visual Studio, so we were building an ASP.NET Core empty project. We were using the .NET 7 framework on this one, even though 8 is available. But so that's why we're kind of sticking with it, right? Just our book is written on 7, and we started with 7, so you stick with 7. We did stick with the HTTPS, even though we've been on many of our other apps, we've been kind of skipping that step. But in this regard, we did. Then we got the code up on the screen, confirmed that this is what we had. We ran it to make sure that we had a nice clean build, right? So we kind of introduced that as a concept too, if you've never heard that before, which is you build the basic application, you hit run, and it builds, some of the binaries on the back end, so they're ready to roll. And it gives us a clean starting point. So we have like at least one spot in the application where it worked, right? Even if it's just the beginning. Right, so that's what they do here. Now they give you this little warning about SSL certificates and all that. That's one of the reasons why I skip the HTTPS thing often, because this is kind of a pain to deal with for some people. And until you're actually launching, or unless you're including authorization, why add all the components to it? It really gives it a lot of overhead. All right, so we did do this step though. So we did, go with HTTPS. From there, we went and added some NuGet packages, and we added most specifically this one here, which runs Entity Framework Core in memory, right? And followed those instructions. And then we set up some additional files here. All right, from there we went to this part, and if you notice, they asked us to build a separate class file called to do, and I think I did that. So I do have the project open, and you can see that there is a to do.cs file that looks like the one that they have. This is just a plain old class file, and just for the sake of those that maybe have never had formal training in object-oriented programming, my students should have, so you should understand the concept of an object in a class. But for those watching online, basically what this is a structure for building objects, right? So we're not including any functionality in it. Right now, it just has 3 data fields, an ID, a name, and then a true false field for is it complete, right? So every time we create a to-do item, all of those to-do items have those properties. If I were to add functions to this class definition, then we would be adding, technically we'd call those methods, but we're adding functionality to the object as well. In this case, that's not happening, right? It's just a data blueprint, if you will. Going back to the tutorial, and probably more correctly, and I'm looking at their terminology here, it says the preceding quote creates the model for this app, and we haven't really learned about MVC programming formally in this class yet, and maybe you haven't had any of that in any of your instruction or path, in coding. But basically, this is kind of a standard technique when we build MVC applications, and really a lot of applications, right? So we set up, once again, this blueprint for how the data travels for any given object, right? And then we call that a model of the data. It's not the information, it's it's kind of the rubber stamp the information fits into, right? And so that's why we call it a model. Now, what happens with that is, when you have a structure for your data, then you can write all this code to manipulate those objects very easily because it's consistent. Without that, could you imagine if you had all these objects with inconsistent data? It'd be very hard to process them, even from a logical standpoint. We also created another file called todo.database.cs, and I'm just zooming in a little bit. We pulled in the entity framework core into it. We talked about what this terminology means. This is basically extending this class with a superclass. So we're pulling in the superclass called DB context, which gives us a bunch of database related tools, obviously. And then we have just a couple of little things here for creating things. And it says it defines the database context, which is the main class that coordinates entity framework for the data model, and it tells you where it comes from. All right. Where we had gotten to is in the program CS file, and thank you for copy paste. We just came in here, we grabbed all this code and we pasted it into our application. So I guess the first thing you should do if you haven't done it already is open your solution file, your project from the last time we were working on this, and then get your files up on the screen. The code that we pasted in, unfortunately, and that made it for a very convenient stop point, threw me a red underline. I'm like, okay, great time to stop, that kind of thing. And I don't want to ignore that as an issue. Now, if you hover over it, right, red line, by the way, if you're not familiar with apps like this, when you're building code, if it's underlined red, it's not even going to compile. So you're not going to be able to build anything, right? It's going to stop you dead in your tracks. A green underline or other colors, it'll often run, but with errors. We did a little bit of talking about this beforehand. One of the students did a little experimenting. I had a couple of thoughts on how to fix it. And then we also had a discussion about what is this and what does it do, right? Because they give you all this code and they don't necessarily explain what every little bit does. But part of the answer is in the name. So, and look at what it is. It's a builder service that says add database development page exception filter. So it's going to recognize that there's exceptions happening on your page, and then it sets up a filter to process those exceptions depending on what kind of an error it is. So like if it's like a severe error, it probably throws up a certain kind of thing, or if it's not so severe, it throws up a different kind of thing. Now, that's based upon the fact that it will fail, right? So the one fix, and I think Ken, you tried this out, right? Is you just commented it out, and the app
Right.
worked just fine, right? So that was one fix on it. But if you do this thing here where you right click and get the quick actions and stuff, you'll notice that they have two possible fixes. One is to convert that line to an object, right? And then assigning it to a memory location to store it. So in other words, you're going to capture whatever this generates and you're going to put it somewhere. So I'm gathering what really is maybe the problem is they're running this exception filter. It's picking up on a code that wants to do something, but we have no routes set up to deal with those issues, right? So that could be one of the reasons why. So instead it's trying to store it and then you can do something with it later, right? Or this approach, which is to convert it to a program.main style program. And by the way, it looks a whole lot like Java all of a sudden, right? Because in truth, C# kind of works like that because Java works like that, and Java and C# are both built on C, which works like that, right? So there's a program, whatever it's called. Then there's the main method, which really runs all the code. And then the approach that we're using here, you can see in the background, is I'm not operating that way. We're just throwing it into not even a namespace, right? We're just throwing it in there and it just runs. So it's kind of like we're inside that container anyhow. So my thought is if I'm going to choose one of these to fix it, that's probably the one I would choose. So I'm going to try it, and I'll be real frank. I'm just trying it. Right? I'm not sure where it's going to take me or if it's going to lead to complete, blow apart in flames kind of disaster. It might, I don't think so, but so I'm going to actually take that fix and apply it, and let's see what happens. So I'm just going to double click it, and you see it automatically converted me to that format. So it put me into an internal class, and in reality, what it is that this is implied, but I'm still seeing the red underline. All right. You know what we say to that then, right? So now, is there another fix to this? Well, right. So I'm not liking any of the options. And really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the top level statement. And I think I'm going to go with Ken's fix, at least for the moment, which is just simply to comment it on, right? Because I have the suspicion that that's not actually needed anyhow. And that's not the comment mark that we use here. What's our comment mark for this language?
Double slash.
Yeah, 2 forward slashes.
You guys passed your midterm. All right, I am absolutely kidding. So we're just going to comment that one out and see what happens. All right, let's kind of roll with this. Right, so this is all the code. So it says the following highlighted code below adds the database context to the dependency injection and enables displaying database related exceptions, right? We're obviously disabling the latter, so that's maybe not the greatest idea, but it is what it is, right? So we already have that code in here, right? So the code was present up here. They're just pointing it out in this box. All right, so now we're going to move on to this next section. So I'm hoping that little thing is behind us. So we're going to do what it says here, which is to create API testing UI with Swagger. So now we're going to be introduced to another new tool here. So they're making the point that there's a bunch of different tools that you can run that allows you to test your app. Now, if you guys remember, we were using Postman to do that, but I think I'll tell you what, it doesn't really hurt anything to try another different tool. And so it says this tutorial utilizes the .NET package and NSWAG ASP.NET. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. And it shows you if you're going to add this tool from the command line, the command that you type, or you can use the package manager. So you can basically type in this message if you wish, or you can add it right to your XML file, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the tool that we're looking for, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add that as a package to our application. So I believe, I would think, that that's exactly what they're guiding us to do here. So, all right. What does this do? And it says it integrates Swagger right into .NET Core. So it allows you to, like the stuff that we were doing with Postman, you could do through this tool. It gives you a bunch of open source tools that go with it. And notice one of them is an API generator and the UI that give you testing pages, kind of like what we were doing with Postman. So it'll look pretty familiar that way. And then it also talks about how it deals with the data within it. So they're recommending here in the tutorial that instead of using the NuGet package manager, that we run the following command in the .NET CLI. So there's our next little challenge, is to do that. Now, Ken, when you did this, did you type it in manually like this? Is that what your technique was?
I did not.
You did not. Did you use NuGet to do it?
I did.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if you want to type it in, you can, right? So what I think I might do is I want to at least kind of click on the graphical tool and look for that, right? So I'm going to search for, and right, and here I am dropping a URL in there, not what I'm looking for. But let's get the name of the tool here. And I think that you could probably just type NSWAG and it'll come up, right? Right. And the one that they were looking for is this one. So it's going to be our first one here, 14.0.8. I don't know if they're mentioning a version. I don't see a version call on it at all. So the latest stable sounds logical to me. So that would be the one technique, right? You could just click install and it will add it. The other technique, and I'm going to close this tab, is to do what the book says explicitly. I may as well demonstrate it. And it brings up the console down here. And what is helpful, real frankly, is to add it like so. And I'm noticing I have the package manager prompt and it doesn't like it, right? Okay, so let's explain why that happened. Because this has some dependencies. Oh, I see. It doesn't like the name of my project. You know what? There's a great reason to skip this approach. By the way, I think it's probably a whole lot easier to just add the package this way. Yep. That was an installed mode here. We're adding it. See it's doing all the downloads and installs. Let it go ahead and apply those changes. First, we have to accept, sign our life away. Ready message down there. So I assume we're all done at this point. So now we should be able to come here on all the installed stuff and we should see it, right? And click on it and get the information that we need. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can remove stuff from here too if you need to. So if you're adding something in that you end up not using and it creates overhead in the project, you may as well just strike it. I'm going to go ahead and close that. You will notice that it does kind of keep track of that, here in, the project file in terms of like what package references we are including. So the entity framework thing that we already added and the NSWAG thing that we just added and the version numbers, right? And see, that was the other approach that they were recommending is you can just come in here, type it in, and then it will add, you can add the dependency from there too. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that. I don't see much reason for why you wouldn't use the NuGet package manager if it's there. That's kind of my take on it. There are still some of those weird, rare tools where you have to go to the command line. But I think that's really kind of a thing of the past now, though, for the most part. All right, let's go to the next step. So we got that in there. They're saying in the program CS file, add the following using statement. So let's go ahead and grab that, add it to the top. So I'm just going to drop that in. Now, kind of interesting if you're wondering, why did that one kind of like gray out a little bit? Well, we're not using anything from it yet. That's why, right? So what it's telling you is the other two above, they're brighter because we're actually using those components. With NSWAG, we haven't done anything yet. So that one, nothing going on yet. All right. Said, add the following highlighted code before the app is defined in the var app builder build thing. So like right in that spot, we're going to add this particular code. So I'm going to grab that. Let's come back over and find that spot. Seems like a good place to place it. All right. Okay, so kind of interesting. I'm just looking at the code and trying to make a little sense of what they're doing here. But you can see they have a document name, a title, and a version number are being kind of embedded here. And what they say about it is in the previous code, this line here enables the API Explorer. That's a service that provides metadata about the HTTP API. The API is used by Swagger to generate the document. Okay. This other line adds the Swagger Open API document generator to the application services and configures to provide more information about the API. So it's just title and version. They have a little reference link there that you can work with. After that var app thing, they then want us to add this other code. This is an if statement. Let's go add it in and then we'll read up on what it does. Pasting it in. All right. And isn't it nice? It looks like it wants to do some routing now. And so I'm not going to take that suggestion. But I'm looking once again at the stuff that it's throwing in there. So title, a path, a document path. Interesting. Notice how it's a kind of URL building there. And then the doc expansion. All right. So no red underlines or anything. So that's good. And it basically says it enables the Swagger middleware for serving the JSON document and the Swagger UI. So it's only enabled in a development environment. Enabling Swagger in a production environment could expose, okay, same thing as we were reading on before, right? This is a development tool. We wouldn't want to go live with this, right? So this is just for building. All right. So now they're having us move on to this section here. It's called test posting data. And this is the following code in program CS creates an HTTP post endpoint to do items that adds data to the in-memory database. All right. So let's go find that code. And that's the way I'm reading it, right? And I think it's this code here, if I'm seeing it correctly. It says run the app. The browser displays a 404 error because there's no longer a root endpoint. Okay, so let's try it. Let's see if that's what happens. So here goes. Right now, I don't know if you guys are seeing this on my screen here, but it says build started. So it's still building. So it looks like it's taking a little bit. So I'm just trying to be patient with it.
Yeah, mine just said web page, localhost page can't be found.
Yours did?
Yeah.
Your Mac is clearly faster than my PC. And I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but I'm seeing this little icon here, which looks like it's downloading or doing something. So I'm trying to be patient here. I'll pause the video for a second while I wait. All right, so I am getting build errors on this, and I don't think I should be getting them, real frankly, because I don't have any red underlines. And then we just had a little discussion here, and I have experienced this before, so that's a pretty astute thing. Whereas when I'm working with ASP.NET applications that start to get robust and use complicated services, and I'm on a cloud drive, that every time I save a file, it's trying to resync it to the cloud. That can cause issues with the local build because it's not necessarily committed to memory yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to move this over to a local drive and then start up again and see where I'm at. So I'm going to, and I wonder if maybe this is a good idea. Maybe we just actually record this rather than obscure it. So, and actually I meant to click no, so now I got to let it run. All right. All right. But not for long. All right. So I'll kill that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this down. And now I'm going to go make sure my Visual Studio is closed. I'm going to go hunt down this project in my Google Drive, right? And that's where I tend to work with most stuff, especially for school. Just it helps me to organize. But I think what I'm going to do, and I don't know if I'm going to grab this whole darn folder. It's probably not that big. So you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab that. Just going to do a copy. I'm going to come to my local documents folder. And by the way, mine does not sync to OneDrive. That's on purpose. So I'll just paste that folder in. Bigger than I thought it was, but hey, not that big. All right, so there it is. And then I'm going to attempt to launch it from here. And this one is the To-Do API. So let's see if it loads up. This is always kind of a weird process too, because sometimes you get these little hiccups and stuff. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but we'll find out in a second. Looks like it transferred in okay. Looks like my changes are all in there. I'm tempted to click get GitHub Copilot there, but I'm not going to do it, folks. I'm just not going to do it. All right. So let's go back. What was our instruction? Our instruction was to run the app. Okay, let's try running the app and let's see if that makes a difference. All right, so here goes. If it builds. All right. Amazing how fast that went, right? And I am getting a blank page, and I think that is expected. Yeah, and it says the browser displays a 404 error message. I'm trying to keep in mind I'm using Chrome. I'm not using Edge, which makes it all bright and white and all that. But I am indeed getting a 404 error. It's just very small. So the next step is to trigger Swagger, and Swagger, once again, it's kind of like Postman, right? And you can see all the gets and posts and puts and all those verbs that we talked about. But this runs right off of the same web server through the same product. That's the why Microsoft is kind of pushing this tool. So they want us to just append Swagger to the URL. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and there comes the interface. And notice that it picks up on the port and everything, and has get post, and then based on the stuff that is in the application, and this is why maybe this tool is a little superior, it kind of reads all the routes and paths and endpoints and middleware and all that, and kind of generates automatically some of the stuff, right? And it shows you like what it's doing now. Notice that it also has a little try it out button, right? And you can hit it, and then it tells you what the response was. And if you look really carefully at the response headers, right, that box there, and how it is time-stamped now, right? And well, it says 2310 GMT, is that correct, right? That means that, 2310 means it's 10 after 11. Well, that's what time it is in England, in Greenwich, right? Because that's Greenwich Mean Time. So it seems like it's working, right? So like it is executing, it's sending a URL, it is getting a response, and then there's a header to the response. That's the stuff that you don't normally see, but it is transported, so it is talking to the server. This is telling us. All right, so I don't know if they like really start to dig in. All right, so they're saying on the Swagger API testing page, select post to do items, try it out. All right, so let's select the one that they're talking about. See, I did the get, right? All right, so let's do the post, try it out. Right, and execute. All right, so let's talk about these output responses here a little bit too, because I think this would be helpful for some of you. First of all, let's talk about what curl is. And I'm not sure what that acronym stands for, but curl is basically a language that we use to interact with servers. We most often use it when we're interacting with PHP in a web server. And it's just kind of a transmission format, is kind of a good way to say it, for sending information back and forth. So like, for example, you could take some of this stuff and use it in a PHP context and have it work. So the URL is this that we triggered by doing the try it out. The response came back with what looks like serialized text, right? So we got the curly brackets and the key value pairs. And then the response headers once again show the current time. That's pretty close to when I hit the enter button. And we got the response code of 200, which is success, by the way, right? So it is talking and it's bringing back a success message. All right, so make sure, like, if you guys are screenshotting this for assignments, that you like screenshot those results, right, as well as the code. All right, I'm going to jump back over to the tutorial. And it says, note the request body field contains generated example format reflecting the parameters for the API. In the request body, enter JSON for to-do item without specifying the optional ID. All right, so they're wanting us to add something here. So let's try this. Let's clear it. All right, so I just want to make sure I'm putting it in the right spot. So we're going to put it here in the request. Right, and is that the correct? Nope, it's not the correct code. All right, let's try that again. That's correct. Actually, let's do a reset on that. Paste it in again. And now we can execute. Right. And then the response comes back. Right. So it's reading that object. I also want you to notice the ID number. Did it come from here? No, it's keeping track. Right. So it knows it's the second request. So it's, so that part of it is also working. And so their ID is 1, but ours is 2 because this is the second time that we're doing it. So did it work? Right? It sure did. What I think is kind of interesting is when they did their screenshots wasn't that long ago, right? Just a few months ago. So this is a fairly fresh tutorial. All right, so this is some of the details they're trying to point out. So the curl thing is an example of a command in Unix Linux syntax can be run at the command line with any bash shell that uses that command line interface of bash. Request URL is a simplified representation of the HTTP request. Right, so go back. simplified. The server response includes the response body and headers, right? So this is what goes back to the client, and then this is the headers that we don't normally see, but it is transmitted, right? And can be logged, right? And if you go into the inspect tools and look at all those interfaces, you can kind of read some of that stuff there too. I think the network interface, if I remember right. And then we look at the response code. All right, so I'm going to pause right here. This is a good pause point here. All right, it seems like everybody's doing all right here, so we're just going to roll forward. Now they're pointing out here that there's a number of different get endpoints. So in other words, when we do a traditional viewable URL in the browser, which is a form of a get, this URL will get all the to-do items. This one will get all the completed items, and then this one will get anyone based on a specific ID. All right. So there's a few different little pieces of code here, and I'm not sure that they're asking us to change anything here. They just want us to be aware, right? So just to kind of do the comparison, we're looking at the route, right? We're looking at the verb get and the route, and then what is that going to do? Now, once again, whenever you see like this kind of little arrow thing, we call this a lambda expression, right? And predominantly what that means is we're running some sort of either named or unnamed function brute force, right? We're just, when they hit that URL, we're going to force this action to happen. And they have a few different things here. So they're talking basically to the database during these steps. So this would pull back the specific things that this is calling for, based on the criteria. You'll notice that when we get all of them, we're not being specific. When we're looking for those that are complete, then there's a secondary internal Lambda call, once again, that has that checkbox. Remember, there was a field that we created is complete, right? That's a true or false. And then that's converted to a list. The final one also reads in an ID number, and basically based on that ID number, will return the results. It'll either return it if it's okay, or not return it if it's not. And if you're wondering what the heck are those, this is what we call I think we call it a tertiary if statement or conditional statement, which is basically if to do is a thing, and it has okay, so that's not correct. This is what it's returning, and we're saying if the results are okay, if it's finding that ID, then it's part of that list. Otherwise, it's going to return a not found message. So it's either a positive result or a negative result. But this is basically an if statement, and I think that's really kind of kind of interesting. That format. If you guys if you've never seen that before. All right. So then we have the kind of like this. I don't know if we should run it at this point, but I think they're going to make us do that. So test the app by calling the endpoints from a browser or Swagger. So you can do it either way. And so what they want you to do in Swagger is select get to do items, try it out, execute. We did this already, right? So we saw that it worked. Or we can do that from the front end. Okay, so let's try from the front end. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that address, just paste it in, and we're going to do to do items. I think that's the URL. And then you can see how it's pulling back all of the objects that we created. Now, we did use Swagger to inject one, correct? And if I just go to get, and this is the one they're asking us to execute, there's no parameters to throw at it. We just execute it. And you can see it's pulling back the same stuff. If I go back to post and I throw in something new, you know, and I also, well, I'll call that one true also, and I execute, you will notice the ID increments to 3, something new, looks like it's stored. Now, if I come back here and do a refresh, you will see that item has been added. All right, so I want to go back and do that one more time, but this time I'm going to set one to false, and let's call this one something old. You know, I don't know what, that's the first thing I could think of, sorry. Let's do the execute. And maybe I hit it twice. I'm not sure, but we can find out actually pretty easily by just refreshing. And it looks like I did hit it twice. So I have 2 something olds set to false, but now I have some that are false. Okay, so the point of that is when we get to, you know, if we want to look at a specific one, we can append the ID number. So let's try that. So if I put ID number 2, or ID number 4, right? It pulls back the specific one. So that part's working fine as well. What was the, I'm trying to remember what was the third, oh, complete, right, complete. Let's try that one. So now it's just returning the ones that have is complete equals true. Right. And so now still nothing beautiful coming back on the screen yet, but we're doing some pretty powerful stuff here. We're creating data, it's saving in memory, we're interacting with it, we're querying it really, right? I mean, we're getting to interact with that data on a simplistic level, but it does show that it is working just fine. All right. Let's talk about this concept under return values, and then we'll take a little bit of a break. Now, it says here with return values that ASP.NET Core automatically serializes the object to JSON, right? So JSON, of course, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. I think we all know that. The data travels inside of curly brackets and square brackets in key value pairs separated by colons and semicolons, right? And or commas actually, but the whole point is that that's like the format, and for whatever reason it's become like the #1 format these days. And when it comes back that way and it's serialized properly, it gives us the okay message with the 200 code, right? If there are exceptions, right, you know, of some sort, they're going to be translated into 500 series errors. You can actually get a bunch of different error responses, right? So like, what if, and fortunately this is still running, I put in an ID number that I know doesn't exist. Like I know it only goes up to 5, so I'll put in 7, for example. Notice the 404, right? All right. Yeah, so if a 200 response comes in, you don't see that response from the browser, you just see the item. All right, let's take a break right here. We're going to pause for a good 5 minutes. All right, the next step that they want us to do here is to take a look at this, the put endpoint. So I'd like to use this verb, and you know, they make a little point at the bottom, and I was reading this before. It says this method is similar to post, except it uses put, which returns a different kind of response. And I want you to take a look at that. It says 204, no content, right? What's kind of interesting about this, when you are putting something, so in other words, like sending it, right? It says it requires you to send the entire updated entity, not just the changes. So if I was changing, let's say, the ID on something or the name of something, I wouldn't just send the changed name, I would send the whole object back, right, with all the data fields. And it says to do partial updates, you really should use patch instead. So this is the code that does that, right? So it's just a put command with the ID, and then it looks like it's the ID number, the thing, and then it pushes it to the database as a true false or whatever. And so it does these various steps here, including see if it's there or not. And then once the changes are saved, it returns the no content, right? The 204 error. So they want us to test this. And it says update the to-do item that has the ID of 1 and set its name to feed fish. Okay, so these are supposed to be to-do items. And they want us to just select to-do and the ID and then try it out, set the field to ID, and this is with Swagger. So let's get that Swagger thing going here. And let's collapse these down. All right, so we're going to test put. And I suppose it would be helpful to know what's in the object, right? So what we could do, right, is we could pull it back here. So the one object is, okay, walk dog, right? And that's what they're calling one is walk dog. They want us to change that to feed fish. How about we just change the one that we have from the name string to feed fish? So really what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab that serialized text there. And if I'm not mistaken, that should be enough to make it work here. Right. So we have to put in the ID, right? That's required. And then this will be the request, right? So, oh, isn't that handy, right? So like, this is exactly the one that we have in there. No, actually that's not true, right? So that's an example. All right. So let's try it out. Let's get the code in there we want to put in there. It doesn't matter what the format is, right? You know, all they're doing is it's this basically, right? They're not really doing anything fancy. Okay, and then we go ahead and we execute. Oh, and I see. Okay, so here's where we're failing. I have to put the ID number up here to match it, and then we'll send the whole thing, right? That was the thing. All right, try it again. There we go. There's the curl command, and we did get a response, but notice it is undocumented. So there's no response. It just tells us when it happened and what the server was, but it doesn't give us any message like, hey, a success or anything like that, or like regurgitate the object or anything of that nature. It just did it quietly, right? Now, did it stick? All right, here's a refresh and focus. I don't think it stuck, right? I feel like I have to do it again. Oh, it did not stick with the ID one, right? Did it change one of the others, or did I even change the text? I guess that's really a good. No, I didn't. Okay, so here we go. Feed fish. So it did exactly what I told it to do. Right, execute. Looks like it worked again. 23, 38, 38 looks about right. All right, let's run that again now. And now we should see a change. And there you go. You see feed fish is now being pulled back. So it is working. Hopefully that's working for you guys too. Now they want us to test the delete endpoint. And it says the sample app implements a single delete endpoint, and they show kind of the code for that. So based upon the ID, it will remove the object from the database. And that's if it finds it, right? If it doesn't find it, it just returns not found. So we're going to go to delete this time. We're going to throw in an ID number, and we're going to try to get rid of that ID that we created. So let's go back to Swagger. We are going to do the delete. The ID parameter is required. So we're going to click in here. We're going to put in the ID of 1. We're going to hit execute. And once again, we've got the same kind of undocumented response, but it seemingly did something. Here's how we can test, of course, is just to run this again. And now you notice ID 1 is gone. So it did get rid of it, and it preserved all the rest. So that was an example of using that verb and having it work. Now, this is the kind of stuff that we were hoping that the chapter 5, was it, stuff that would work for us, and it just wasn't working there. The examples from the book were a little cumbersome, but this is an example of being able to do basically all of the CRUD operations and make them work. I mean, and that's pretty cool. All right, now they're pointing out this next little part here. And it says the sample app code repeats the to-do item URL prefix each time it sets up an endpoint. And it says APIs often have groups of endpoints with a common URL prefix, and the map group method is available to help organize such groups, and it reduces repetitive code and allows for customizing of entire groups of endpoints with a single cell to call methods like require authorization and with metadata. Okay, so it says replace the contents of program CS with the following code. So they're having us replace all of it, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy all that and go back to Visual Studio here. So we're going to blow away everything we've done. That's why it's important to screenshot this, before you blow it all away. And now I'm going to select all and paste, right? I anticipate we might have that same error here. So let's go ahead and just comment that out. So it seems to work without just fine. And then I'm going to do a Control S to save. I think it's interesting. The web server is still running, so I'm going to actually kill it, right? Because it's still running the previous version, even though I'm changing the code. All right, let's go ahead and read up on this a little bit before we run it. It says it has the following changes. It adds a variable to do items to set up the group using the URL prefix to do items, right? Changes all the verbs, basically. You can see like the syntax you're using here to a different format. So we just call this then to do items map verb. So in other words, instead of calling the whole app each time, we've kind of taken the core URL that we were using with the group and assigning it to a variable name, and then using that variable name so I don't have to type on all that in addition to this, right? It also removes the URL prefix to do items from that method call. And then we're going to basically test the endpoints to verify they all work the same. All right, so in other words, let's get this running. Hopefully it builds. And let's put in the root URL. Still get our 404. And then if we put in to do items, all right, we have a blank thing. Is that okay? Well, let's go to Swagger. So let's do this through Swagger at this point. And you'll notice that it's picking up on all the URLs that we can use. And let's just do a simple get on this and execute. And what is it returning? Nothing. Well, why? Well, because we haven't added anything. So we do need to do a post or a put to start with. It's going to be one or the other. And so they're putting in an ID of 0. I'm going to start with 1, and we'll do feed fish is complete true. And then hit execute. And you can see we got the response body. So now if I go and do a get, There's nothing to throw in there. We just execute. It should pull that one back. Okay, so that's a test that that part works. What else do we have to try? We have to try a put, right? And this one requires an ID, so let's put in ID 2. And then we need to send the whole object, including the ID, which is kind of silly. Maybe we can do walk dog is complete. We'll say false, and then we'll hit execute, and then hopefully response here. And then once again, if I go back to get, right, and execute, now I should pull back. Let's clear it. Let's execute. It's pulling back feed fish, and I'm not sure if that's correct. Let's try this in the browser. Sure, I have the right host. That's the bottom one there. Okay, so feed fish did stick. Walk dog seems like it did not. Let's try that again. So I'm just wondering if that's my failing, or if this is really trying to change the one that's already there. You see where my brain's going on this? So how about we do this? Let's try another post first. So let's reset that. And I apologize for bouncing around so much. Let's put in a second item. Dog. Set it to false just because. Execute. Okay, so it seems like it put it in. So now I'm trying to see if the get, and maybe it's just because I didn't hit that reset thing. Okay, so now you see both, right? And that's what I was trying to get to happen. All right, so we got get and post working for sure. Now let's do put, and we'll try to change that second one, right? Which is ID 2 walk dog to true. At the timestamp here to make sure it's the correct one. And I'm going to go back to get up at the top. To see if I'm getting all right. So it did change, right? So you guys are catching that. So get, post, and put are all working. And the last one to try is delete. Then we just pick out one of the IDs, and let's remove ID 1 and execute. We did get a response. Now, once again, all the way back up to the top. And let's try this out again. We'll execute. And now number 1 is gone, but 2 is still there. Okay. So I think that's pretty good so far. You guys doing okay with this?
Yep, I got the same as you.
Okay.
I only
Yeah,
have
same.
the walk dog.
All right. I'm going to pause here for just a real quick sec. All right, so now we're moving on to this next section called use the typed results API. And all right, so let's first learn what is a typed result. And basically, it produces certain kinds of responses depending on what they do, right? So you can see a bunch of different types of returns that it does, a huge number of them actually. And it's basically a class file that then we can then react to, right? It comes back as an object, and then we can kind of roll with whatever it's kind of telling us, you know, is really kind of the point. you know, so it says the revision of this map verb thing calls the route handlers instead of using lambdas. So um, in other words, we can use the regular verbs here, right, to get to these endpoints with these kind of like weird generics thrown in too, without having to do like what we were doing before. Now, I don't think we need to change any of the code. Oh no, actually it says, to see an example, update the whole thing with the following code. All right. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So let's just grab it all. Oops, not the whole darn web page. Let's just hit copy. Come back here, select all the code, paste the new code in. I assume we have to comment out this line again to kind of work around it. All right, so here's the save. I think we're okay to roll here. So I'm going to hit stop on the server. And then ideally what you would do in this scenario is you would test all the actions once again, so all the different URLs, you can do it this way. Of course, we start out basically blank. And then of course you can bring in the Swagger tool if you prefer. That one's not loading. And I think the point of that is that we can use the direct URLs now, right? So I think we probably want to create one, right? And maybe a put is the way to do it. But let's go back to their description here because I kind of feel like I'm missing a little piece. So let's see if I'm correct on that. Update the program with the following code, which we did. So I'm just basically reading what they have here. So they're saying that now those verbs call those points, right? So we're just looking at those same points. And I don't know if all of this code is in there already or not. So this is where I'm a little confused as to where they're putting this. I had the impression delete, update, create, and get, right? So I'm just looking at, these items here, right? And get, complete, create, update. Okay. So I'm not sure if I have all of them or not. All right. So let's see if we can verify what we have. So get all, get complete, get to do, create, up. I don't know. I think I have them all. And I don't know if they're asking us even to update them or not, real frankly. And see, now they're pointing out a thing that we haven't really kind of delved into, which is this thing called unit tests. So unit tests is a way to write code to test your code, basically, without having to manually do what we're doing. Like, click on Swagger, enter information. You can write code that can do the same thing. I'm trying to see like how they're. All right, so I think they're just using this as an example. They're not asking us to actually execute it. They're just kind of doing it. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second. And all right, so we talked a little bit about like whether or not this is intended to run or not. And my general feeling is that this is really designed to be set up for unit tests more than what we're doing here. But I'm still kind of tempted to verify that my code is all the same. So that's what I'm going to do here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in kind of bits and pieces, trying to be somewhat clever about this. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the app from running. That would probably be helpful. And I'm not finding a really convenient way to kind of side by side this because of the size of the windows and stuff that I'm dealing with, but maybe this will get us sort of close. Sort of close is a good way to say it. All right, so let's just start right up at the top here. And I'm going to look at this, and I'm not sure if we're so I'm looking at these lines look pretty much the same. Looks good, looks good. And I'm just showing you where my eyes at right now. So now I'm looking down to this static stuff. Helps if they're about the same size too. Same. Same. I know this is kind of goofy. I know there's better tools for doing this, but dig those out right now. All right. So I think we're okay. They show the call to the verbs. And then I think once again that all of these static async things are all the same from what I can tell. I don't see any differences. I'm not being really precise about the double check, but no, it's all the same code. So really what they're doing is they're talking about it. They're not really demoing it. And they're just making a point though that unit test code can verify an object of type okay in a list, right? In a list array or whatever. And okay, so what they're showing here is that if it pulls back results, right, that it can double check it, and depending on whether it's valid or not, return it, right, for the unit test. We were talking a little bit about unit testing while we were muted and paused, and really the whole process of unit testing, once again, is where you write code that simulates user interaction, tests for a correct response, and then reports back to the testing engineer. And then I think the example that I used is like we're doing this thing where we have like 4, 5, 6 endpoints that we're testing. But what if you had hundreds or thousands or something like that? It would make sense to write code to do it. And then it's verifiable and documentable and all of those things. So people make entire careers of that, by the way. So, all right, let's go back to the full screen mode here. One last section that they're talking about, it says, currently the sample app exposes the entire to-do object. Production apps and production applications, a subset model is often used to restrict the data that can be input and returned. And there's multiple reasons behind this, and security is probably one of the biggest ones. A subset of the model is usually referred to as a data transfer object, input model, or view model. So in other words, we have a real model of the data, and then we have the secondary model that we use just for moving the data around, right? We can use this to prevent overposting, hide properties that clients aren't supposed to see, omit properties to reduce the payload size, so there's no reason to send redundant information back and forth, and flatten object graphs that contain nested objects, which is more convenient for the client applications, the browser, to open. It says here, to demonstrate the DTO approach, update the to-do class to include a secret field. And notice that this is the secret field, so I'm just going to go ahead and add that. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio, and let's go full screen, get the Solution Explorer more normal, and then in the to-do class, we're going to add another data field, right? And I always forget that they add that automatically in there. And and notice it's got the little optional thing there, and it's secret, and it's got a get set. So the users aren't supposed to see this, basically. So we would update that. And then, right, so it says secret field needs to be hidden from this app, and admin app could choose to expose it. So in other words, I could run a separate application off of this project, or a separate program file, basically, that could access that information, but the public facing web browser part of it doesn't, right? What could be contained in there could be anything, right? All right, so it says verify that you can post and get the secret field. So create a file named to do item DTO CS with the following code. All right, so we'll just copy the code. To do item DTO. So I'm going to come back here. We're going to create, we're going to add, I should say, a class file. Just a regular old class file. And once again, I'm going to check the spelling. Capital T, capital I, capital DTO. So to do item DTO. Add that. And I'm just going to get rid of all that stuff and just paste in. All right, so we're saving that. Looks okay, no underlines or anything. And notice ID name is complete. It also has these two other references, which are the ones that ramping up with this. Right, now they also want us to replace the contents of the program CS file with the following. So go ahead and copy that back over to program CS. Click in there, Control A, Control V. Let's go ahead and see if we can comment out the one that we know is going to fail. And we have a bunch of these other things in here. And I think what we have to do, they're not mentioning it here, but I don't know if you guys remember, but we have to, I think we have to use that, right? Using, I think that should solve it. Not doing it. Let's hover and see if it has a. They're saying it's ambiguous. All right, let me see if I spelled my stuff correctly here. Let's start there. So I have to do item DTO, which uses to do API. I'm going to pause here one more time. All right, I just want to show you guys my problem solving thoughts here. You know, I'm not really sure exactly what's causing the problem, and I don't want to get really deep into it, but they do have a completed version of the project we can download. So let's just kind of go to that. We are working with 7. And I think, you know, I'm not really sure which is one we want to look at here. Because we're looking at typed results, I think. Right, shows how confident I am on what I'm doing. But hey, we're preventing over posting. All right, let me go forward on that then. One more time. And so one way to check it is to look at, that does not look like the right version, does it? It does. Oh, you know how I'm being really silly about this. So how do I know which one is the right one? Well, it's the one that's got um that file in there, right? So it's gotta be that one. Well, this has all the swagger stuff in it. All right, so I'm trying to like be really open with you guys. I'm not finding their sample here that without like going into each single one. I'm just wondering, maybe the top one's the bottom, the finished one. I don't think so, right? All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna throw my hands up in the air and say I don't know, right? Let's go back. Let's see if we can figure this out on our own. Just got back my way all the way out of here. One of you guys finds which is the right one. Let me know. I'm just like checking all their stuff here again. I think it's interesting, that you're in different platforms, you have to use different libraries. Let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's see if we can. All right. Well, one of my students realized that they were also getting the red underlines in the to-do item DTO file. And then I don't know why, so my brain slowly works sometimes. But if you look at these other files here, we were namespacing these external files, and we didn't do that here. So let's put a namespace around it, and it's easy enough to just kind of copy the structure. So I'm just going to copy that and simply add it here, add a closing curly bracket. Voila, red underlines gone away. And I'm going to assume same thing happened here. Okay, so we're good, right? Now this does not have Swagger running on it, so we can run it and test it. So let's just do that. Let's give it a run. Let's get the URLs cranking here. So let's do to-do items, empty, makes sense. If we wanted to post to this, and I'm trying to think of how do we do this from the URL. All right, well, I guess we can look at the to-do items. And I think if we send in, I'm not sure how to do it straight up from the URL. So maybe we want to get the Swagger going, but I'm guessing that, all right, I think if we just send a one, let's try this. And I don't want to go through the trouble, really, real frankly, of adding all the Swagger pieces in there. But I think there should be no objects existing in there right now. I just want to make sure I'm kind of following through with my examples here, and I'm like kind of have like bouncing between like web pages and whatever. And I think this is where if we have a completed version. So now I'm thinking I can go back to their version because they have the one with Swagger I could copy. And you know what? Let's do this in a new tab. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this code. It should work with the rest of it, I'm hoping, because this does have the Swagger stuff built in. So I'm just going to Control A, copy it. Control C, cross some fingers. One underline we expect. Let's comment that out. I'm going to save it. I'm going to stop the server from running because it's already running. We're going to restart it. There it goes. Let's see if Swagger comes up here. All right, thank goodness. All right, let's do a get and try it out and execute. We should get a blank. Okay, so that's good. Let's go to post. Let's try it out. So we have to give it something. So let's put in ID 1. Say just do it. That's my to-do list. And is complete. I'll say false because I'm not doing it. Looks like it worked, right? So let's trust that from the URL. Let's again address from here. All right, so looks like it's working, right? Let's now try put, and that's where we're changing the one that we have, right? So we're going to change ID 1. What are we changing it to? Let's change it to 1. My to-do list is stop, execute. Looks like it worked. Back here doing a refresh, and you can see that. Okay, so it is working. The last thing to try is the delete. So let's try the delete. The parameter on this one is ID of 1. Execute. Looks like it worked. Now we'll refresh that list and it is gone. Right. All right. So this is seemingly working all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and stop the app here. And that is having tested it with Swagger all the way through. So I think we've made it successfully through the tutorial and got all the stuff to work. There's a few things, more I would experiment with if I was playing with this deeper, but we are kind of running out of time. In order to kind of like, we're using all these like verbs here, right? And I didn't even test, I guess, the complete thing or this, from the regular URL. But I'm pretty confident all that stuff would work just fine. In order to trigger, in my mind, the post and the put in particular, to be able to feed the data. And that's kind of like, it comes from a different part of the application that we're not really building yet. So that's why we're using Swagger. Swagger again is like Postman. I can see the appeal of this, just adding it right to your project, and then you have it available during testing, and you just bring up that URL. You can test all the things, see if the data is flying around correctly. But at this point, I'm going to call this tutorial complete. And that was this one here. And I'm going to try to make sure to remember to post a link to this in the YouTube videos for those people that are watching it from the internet. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep like working on some of these tutorials and adding to this, by the way. But for the students in my class, once you've done all the steps in the video, make sure that you screenshot all the key steps as they're happening, and then also zip the final version of the code to submit with the submission as well. If you have questions, just pop me an email. And this video ends here, folks.